Good evening, everyone, and welcome to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for spiritual advice for your everyday life. We are live from IKYA Center here in Oslo, Norway, and my name is Andy. I work as operations manager here. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us here on YouTube Live, as well as our live studio audience. And after a short break, we are back to dive into a topic tonight that is extremely timely because it is actually happening in the everyday in countries all over the world. What we're looking at tonight is the topic of really freedom versus control. And, you know, especially in the Western world, freedom has been at the heart of our cultural values. I myself am originally from the United States, and we kind of wave the flag of freedom around the world. But the reality is that the choices that we're making, both as individuals, as communities, and as governments and countries, are leading us down a path where it looks like perhaps maybe a police state where a lot of control is exerted over our individual rights and freedoms is kind of inevitable. So we want to really explore this because freedom is also a really important spiritual concept. And IKYA has a take on freedom that might be very different than the way you've thought about it until now. So we're going to dive right into it and just ask the question that we posed for IKYA Live tonight. So IKYA, is a police state around the world inevitable?
Short answer is yes. Humans are not smart enough for the current civilization. And I'll explain why. We have become consumers, right? And consuming means that we simply want things to work, and then we buy them and we consume, and if they don't work, we just complain. And we've not only become consumers of products and services, we become consumers of politics, consumers of society, consumers of rights and democracy. We just want it to work. And we have taught each other to not take responsibility because we want the good stuff. We want to shortcut everything. I've talked before about how we all today self-medicate in different ways, but when we want that instant gratification and we simply want to feel good, what happens with kids where they have too much instant gratification? They become complete assholes. They become self-centered. They never learn how to build anything. They never learn how to achieve. They just get caught in this emotional state where everything is about their own feelings and how to satisfy those feelings. And if they're not satisfied, then they're scream and yell. And today, you know, that's the society we've got pretty much. Remember that in the old days, I say the old days being back, you know, a couple 100,000 years and basically up to recent times, life was tough and you had to achieve something. You had to make something of yourself. You had to be productive. You had to be part of your tribe. And there was no consuming. If you wanted something, you have to make it or trade it for something that you had made. So this world is too advanced for us. We don't know what to do with it. And we become increasingly self-centered. And it's all of that. And we'll begin to pull this apart a little bit. Because we see the same thing, I think, in modern spirituality. You know, many people say, oh, they're part of lifting the consciousness and all of that. But at the core of it is, are you taking responsibility? You know, because the police state is the result of people behaving immaturely and not taking personal responsibility for anything. And we're definitely heading in that direction. Also in modern spirituality, we see a lot of people who they are, you know, very indulgent. They're just indulging in their own feelings and their own fantasies, and they're not contributing to society in any measurable way. But I think that is lifting the planet. It's a level of immaturity and childishness that is harmful. And the thing is, freedom, the way we think of it as humans, is freedom from. It's always freedom from responsibility, from pain, from problems, from other people. And when you become more advanced or more mature as an individual, even as a human, you understand that freedom comes from achievement. It comes from mastering your life. So you understand how the rules work and you can use them to your advantage. You may be productive, you can build your life, you can achieve whatever you want by learning the rules, learning not just rules of society, but rules of life, rules of nature, and you learn how to work with them. It takes responsibility, it takes self-observation, it takes self-discipline. It takes long-term thinking. All of these things are lost in today's society because we are all groomed into becoming consumers. And again, what happens in the brain is that when everything is instant, we can buy whatever we want. We don't learn to think long-term anymore. And again, in the brain, that's a childish state. So we retrieve into a more immature state of being. And when we behave like kids, we need parenting. Kids do not understand how the world works, and they do not take responsibility. So the less we take responsibility as humans, the more we kind of outsource everything that has to do with our own survival and how to make life work. We need more and more control. What we've seen, for instance, is that when you have a mature person, an aware person, you need very few rules or guidelines. And when you have more rules, people stop reflecting. They stop taking responsibility because then it's about following the rules. And the intention of our civilization was good. It's to build freedoms for everyone, build rights for everyone. But at some point, you have to balance out everything, right? Because the more rights we have, we want everything to be equal. We want everyone to have the same, which means that we need more and more and more rules. And then people stop thinking. They stop reflecting, and rules become meaningless. So the more rules we have, the more meaningless they become, because it's not up to you anymore. Everything is regulated, so you just have to follow it, and then it's more fun to break them. Because the only way you can then feel some form of freedom is when you break the rules. Not when you contribute, not when you build, but when you break the rules. Right? And that's also childishness. But this is what happens when we have a lot of rules. They become meaningless, and we just want to break them. When we don't have rules, we more easily see the consequences of our actions because we will be held personally responsible. I've mentioned this example before, but in the UK there was a road where they had a crossing, and there were quite a number of accidents there because people were trying to cross the road and then cars would hit them, and instead of having more regulation, they made an experiment where they actually removed the crossing. And it meant that people crossing the road would have to think and actually look instead of, I have the right to cross the road. And drivers would have to look out for people. So the number of accidents went down. And it's this, we have completely failed in our society to stimulate the sense of responsibility and thinking and reflection and behaving responsibly. Now it's just, there are so many rules. And we get more and more rules because when we are not taking responsibility anymore, it's just about, well, I'm under all these rules, so they should be under all these rules too. I want this to be fair. So then you want even more rules. So when you feel that you're being controlled, you want to control every other person as well. So then you're supporting more rules as long as it's not about you. And we end up in this hell where there's simply rules for absolutely everything, and where people demand more equality, more rights, that everything is more equal and just. And to achieve that, we need to control absolutely everything in everybody's lives, and that's the police state. So it's interesting that the more rights we have, the faster we move towards the police state. Because humans are simply not smart enough. So it's kind of fun that the idea of democracy will ultimately lead to dictatorship. Rights and freedoms will ultimately, for humans, lead to freedoms being taken away. I think also, once you have several freedoms, the thing is, remember that we, in our brains, will still live back in the Stone Ages. We have a tribal mindset. Our brains are just hardwired still to live in small tribes. Who had the right to have an opinion or to state their opinion? Only the leader, right? For most of human evolutions, if you criticized power, you would be killed. So you had to be careful about what you said, how you expressed yourself, what you did. And only the people on top had the right to express themselves, because when you have that freedom, it means that you have power. So genetically, when we have the right to say what we want, and when we're allowed to have our opinion, genetically we think, oh, I'm powerful now. I should influence others, because only the ones who are telling other people what to do actually have the right to state their opinions. And genetically, this is kind of reverse engineering. Because you're saying what you want, you believe that you're powerful and that other people should listen to you. So immediately, what happens, like over generations, we become more entitled and we think, well, my opinion matters, because genetically you're triggered into these kind of power chemicals. So you believe that you're smarter than others. You should rule. And not only that, when you have power, it means that other people should not have the right to say what they want, because they are wrong. Because in the old days, throughout evolution, if you had an opinion, you were able to speak it, you were in power, meaning that other people should be suppressed. Remember that in a tribe, for small groups who don't know anything about the world, no science, no information, their best bet is to let people with the best skills decide everything, right? So the person who's better at hunting or fighting or whatever it is should make the rules, because if we follow that person, we will survive. And then the opinion of everybody else simply do not matter, because they don't carry the skill set, or they don't, it's that thing. And we all have it in us, that we could all become that leader. It depends on skills and situation and all of that. So it's part of our epigenetic kind of switchboard. So when we have rights, we will begin over time to think that I'm important. And it means that other people are wrong. They should listen to me. And they should not be allowed to speak this way. They should not be allowed to express themselves that way, because this is not right. I am right. So what happens when we have these freedoms? Over time, humans will want to control other people and stop them from saying and behaving according to how they interpret freedom, because they are wrong. So humans are hierarchical. I've said this many times. It doesn't matter what the game is, what circumstance we create. Humans will turn it into a power game and hierarchy. And now it's about who controls reality. This has always been the number one commodity. It's the sign of the ultimate power, the one who can decide what reality is. And today, it's a free-for-all. And it means that we're genetically supposed to try to dominate and basically tell other people what our sense of reality, and we are right, and we're supposed to fight to the death. So we just assume that we are on this kind of power rise because we have the right to say what we want and behave the way we want. That combined with a lot of rules means that the way I show my power is that I'm above the law. And today we're all above the law. We're all breaking the rules. We don't see the point because I should do whatever I want. I should say whatever I want because I'm right. But other people, they should be stopped. And we see this today increasingly. Even among young people, tolerance means that other people should tolerate me. But they should just shut up because they should not have the right to say or behave in the way they want to. They should be my ally. It's all of that. Yes.
Yes, I was wondering if you could comment upon the fact that a lot of people who study most of their lives and are the best within their fields are not necessarily the ones who are speaking out, who are the ones who are being heard. It's a lot of people who don't have any competence at all, who are the most visual and who are speaking the loudest. And how come that is? Like scientists and engineers who really study on the top of their fields, they're silent. And instead, there's a lot of noise from people who don't really know anything.
Right. It's always been like that. And the reason is that the more you know, the more you understand that you don't know anything, because your map expands, but you maintain your size. Right? When you know very little, you still are supposed to believe you know everything, or at least a lot. Right? So this is all you need, because obviously this is what I know, and who needs anything more? It's like a lot of people are saying, we don't need science. They're just a bunch of nerds doing weird shit. Like, I don't see science around me, so we don't need it. Like, people can be that stupid. But they believe that they need all they need to know, because we're supposed to have self-confidence so we can go out there and procreate and dominate. So when you know stuff, meaning that you're educated, you actually, expand your map, you maintain the same size, meaning you get context. And you see yourself as more and more insignificant, because the world becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more complex. And you realize, as one person, I can only do so much. I can only understand so much. And I'm just scraping the surface. So you get a better contextual understanding of yourself. But if you know very little, your map is very small, and you think that's the whole world. And that entitles you, of course, to dominate. But we are supposed to. And this is the thing. Often leaders who dominate are not smart people. They're not knowledgeable, because then they wouldn't want to dominate. They would understand that they're insignificant. So when it comes to dominance in traditional leadership, it's been the violent ones, the ones with a big ego and a lot of self-esteem and the willingness to use force. Because ultimately, survival is not about knowledge, it's about dominance. Right? So you cross a line the more you know, and you become uninterested in power, because you see through it. So only ignorant people normally are attracted to power games, that they become the leaders because their maps are so small. Right? Trump is an excellent example. He knows nothing about anything, and yet he's the best ever. Right? And when he then tried to create policies on healthcare, so, it's too complicated. Who knew? Nobody knew, right? Because he didn't know. And he's a typical person. When you look at human history, he's the blueprint. He's not the exception. It's basically, with democracy, we got a different breed of leaders. But in human history, that's a very, very small part. It's like a second. Right? It's been the power hungry, the people who think they know everything. And people like to follow that. Because again, we understand it's ultimately about dominance and perceived strength and making people do things. For instance, a person like Trump, he doesn't need to know anything. He has a way of making everyone run around him in circles and wanting to please him, including people with knowledge. But he himself is utterly stupid. And most leaders throughout history have been extremely stupid. If they were not, they wouldn't be interested in power. So it's a way to compensate, right? The smaller the map, the greater you think you are because you know everything. And everything is very simple. This is also why people in power think, well, you know, they know answer how to do things because they actually don't know anything. And sometimes when we know too much, every decision becomes so complicated that we're not able to make a decision. This is why, for instance, bureaucrats can have an enormous knowledge, but they're completely impotent when it comes to making productive decisions. So you need stupid leaders to be able to cut through, right? So if you can have the right balance, this is what we've seen throughout history, is that if you have smart people and a dumb leader, that's actually a good combination to get things done. And dumb leaders communicate better with people because they're on the same level of smartness. So they can, you know, pull people with them in the way smart people can't. We're not better than this, unfortunately, right? So, you know, and it's also that thing where today we are addicted to comfort. It's part of the consumer mindset that I'm not responsible. I don't want to be responsible. I simply want things to work. And it should work the same every time. And everyone should do what I want them to. It means that we want to remove every danger. We want to remove like every challenge. And just like with overprotective parents, right? It means that we have to have rules for everything. Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Because the rules are then not about what you can do. If you want to remove dangers and everything unpleasant, it will always be about what not to do. And when you look at Western society, we have so many rules about what not to do in every single situation. But we don't have rules about like how to promote constructive or productive behavior. The thing is, prosperity means taking risks, right? It means to push the boundaries. And it's not safe. It's not comfortable. And we need to allow that. So this is why, for instance, most, you know, when you have a dictatorship, most innovation stops. You can get really good at stealing, but innovation stops because everything is controlled. And to innovate, you cannot have controlled thought. You can control behavior. And, you know, one thing that is interesting about the approach, for instance, in China versus the West, because there is a lot of control in the West as well, and a lot of control in China. But we have two different strategies. In China, they're not as concerned with controlling people's behavior. They're trying to control how people think. Right? You can do whatever you want to, but don't criticize the party. Don't think or express your thoughts in a way that goes against, the will of the party. But apart from that, do whatever. Because they understand that once you control people's minds, their behavior will come from that controlled mind. In the West, We can say, think whatever we want, but we want to control your behavior, which is impossible. Because our behavior comes from how we think and how we feel. And when we can then do whatever, we can make up our own minds about everything, that will translate into behavior. And that has caused an enormous decay in moral behavior, in responsible behavior, in contextual behavior. And that, in turn, is proving to all of us that nothing matters anymore. The rules are not important and I'm more important. So first, it has caused a decay in moral behavior and responsible behavior, and then it is now corrupting our minds. So the Chinese way is actually better when you want to control a society. Humans are not good at this freedom thing because we're not responsible beings. We're used to being controlled, we're used to being led. Back to the tribes, back to, dictatorships being the only form of government humans have ever had, except for the last 2 minutes. It's because it works. And this is why, when you have kids who suddenly think that, I don't need parents, I can make up my own mind, at some point that will not work very well. And this is what we're seeing. Humans are not good at taking personal responsibility. We'll only do what we're forced to do, unfortunately. So what you see in China is actually smarter when it comes to mass control. It's impossible to control the behavior of everyone unless you want to make everything illegal. So, our civilization is in deep troubles right now. And there is no quick fix, unfortunately.
Yes, we have a question in the audience.
I try again. I have worked a lot with disturbed children, who don't has been able to fit in the school or everything, and it was in the psychiatry. I think I could see that the problem was that how they was brought up, how the parents didn't be. So this about the rules. I think that young children need parents who give them rules so they can understand, and because the most disturbed children I saw, they didn't know what to do. So we had to come. What's the rule today? And that was they had.
Yes.
Yeah, they had to learn what the good way was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, kids need boundaries.
Yeah.
But it's not only the boundaries, because boundaries are mostly about then controlling behavior. It's also about shaping their minds.
Yes.
And it's also establishing a value system.
Yeah.
Right? In our part of the world, we have no values anymore.
Yes.
Right? We've lost that. And then it's only about
1 point.
behavior. Right? So we need both.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a value system, the boundaries don't make sense. Right? And it's that. Right? And often when you see kids who are behaving in a way that does not fit society and that have really problems understanding inner rules, it's because parents have not been establishing a value system. They have not set the example, right? Because kids will interpret what are the values, and that's basically who are we? Who are we in the world? And when parents are not doing that, the kind of internal rule set will not exist, right? Because parents will have to be consistent in demonstrating their values through their own behavior, right? And this is often why religious parents do better, because at least they have a set of values that they're trying to practice, and both parents have the same set of values. It doesn't really matter what religion it is, but at least they have clarity about values, and the kids will be introduced to that, and that will influence them. And when they grow up, they can change their value system, but at least they have one.
That's the point. And I have, and children today, they don't need to want things because they get them before they want. Know that they want. They don't have to work for anything, and they are not able to learn how to do things.
To achieve things,
Yeah.
right. Yes, it's extremely harmful.
Yeah.
Because human survival always been about productivity and achievements and long-term thinking, working together. When everything is whatever I want, I get it. You lose the ability to look forward to something. You become extremely impatient, and the distance between wanting something and getting it becomes extremely uncomfortable and painful. You do not learn how to regulate your emotions and wants and needs. And this is what we see with a lot of these kind of screaming young people. It's just that, right? But we as a society, we've made these decisions. And part of it is, of course, that the big corporations, they know exactly what they're doing. When we become mindless consumers, we stop thinking, we become less critical, and we're not able to look at the big things. Because the more we get addicted to my wants and that kind of, that instant gratification, and that's all we can seek, we're not able to look at the bigger plan, the bigger goals. So corporations can work with their strategies, no one's paying attention. But we care if a product has the wrong packaging. There's an outrage. How can they? While they can destroy the rainforest and everything else, no one's paying attention, because that takes a long-term sense of thinking, a longer attention span, and it's got nothing to do with their own feelings. So when we want instant gratification for our feelings, most of the things that matter are not connected to that. Only small things, only insignificant things. So the corporations want us to be occupied with insignificant little things. And the shorter attention span we got, and the more we consume, the more insignificant things we care about. This is why we can see on social media there's an outrage for this, and when people say the wrong thing, they're canceled. It doesn't matter, right? While there are terrible things happening in the world and nobody cares because they're not being emotionally triggered. And it's that. And remember, in our brains, in our genetics, we have a very strange programming. It's when we are unable to do something about the big issues, we make small issues big. Because we all have to feel important that we're doing something. So when we are unable to address the big things, we become obsessed with the little things, because those we can do something about. Then we feel good, and then we have to make them look really important. So we can tell ourselves the story that I matter, right? And in a world that is increasingly complex, increasingly difficult, even politicians, this is, they can't make real change because it's one global machine. They have no idea how to change it. So let's focus on other things, smaller things. And they become obsessed with, simple, issues that can make people feel, be triggered. So instead of addressing the big issues, they address the small issues that can make people feel big. And that's what we see globally, that especially in the Western world, people demand politicians who address small, insignificant issues and make them incredibly important. So you get a bunch of policies that are meaningless. for instance, look at the whole environmental thing, right? We are not willing as people to do what it actually takes. If we today canceled our civilization, we all went back to riding a horse and eating what we grow. At this point, everything has accelerated to such a degree that if we did that, we would postpone the effect it has on nature like 100 years from now with about 15 minutes. Nothing we do matters. It would take huge systemic changes. So, because they have no idea how to do that, let's focus on the little things that can make people feel and make them feel like they're doing something. All these little annoying things. You know, like a little tax here, a stupid rule there, so it looks like we're doing something. Because what's happening, and what has happened over the last few decades, is that the thinking politicians, they're voted out because they don't make people feel. They don't trigger people. They focus on the big issues, and nobody's interested in that. They just want to feel. They want to feel outraged, and they want to feel that they're right. So then they vote in politicians that are focusing on the little insignificant things and make a lot of policies, controlling people's lives even more because we want everyone else to be controlled, right? Many young people today, they seriously think that they should be able to go through life without ever having to experience or hear anything they disagree with. For real. It takes a police state, a totalitarian regime, to make sure that no one ever says or does anything that someone somewhere can be offended by. And this is what many young people actually want. Right? Because we've told them that their emotions are so important. And because even parents now, they're not addressing the big issues because the machine is working. So we, throw a tantrum if we don't get a jacket in the right color. If they're sold out in the toy store because we wanted that toy. How dare they? Right? If we don't get the right phone. If the apps are not working, it's that. It's insignificant. It's not the big issues. So humans have migrated away from big issues. And they voted out thinking politicians. They voted out people who are able to deal with bigger issues. And they want the politicians that are involved with insignificant nonsense that just create rules to control everyone they don't like. And becomes petty and small, but people love it. While corporations can do what they do with less and less oversight, and this is what we've seen in the world. Corporations have less oversight now than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Because people are not paying attention, they don't want to. We don't want to know that a lot of our products are made by like child labor and slavery and all of that, because no, we want instant gratification. So yes, as Bill Maher often says, like humans are not good people, right? We are only concerned about our own survival, and we're willing to sacrifice every person we don't know to achieve that. It's just how we work. We're not more advanced than this. We don't have true empathy. We have tribalism, which means we feel empathy towards those we decide are part of our tribe. But we're not better than this.
Yes, we have an interesting question from the Netherlands of, in the past, there have been these sort of philosopher kings, leaders like Marcus Aurelius, who were smart and effective. Are they just coincidental outliers, or were they related to that specific time and place, or maybe even that consciousness of that time?
Most leaders of that type, they inherited the throne. Very few thinking kings and rulers came into place the normal way, because that would be through force, through war, through killing everyone. So, yeah, it's the result of, you know, a king or a ruler and his beautiful wife, because often kings had access to the best women. So maybe a very, very smart queen, you know, and then they would have very intelligent children, right? So the few examples we have of this, hardly ever did they come into power by themselves.
Yes, we have another question in the audience.
Yes. Could you give us an example? I think if we were relating to what you spoke about before that last question, if we want to start with ourselves, how can we overrule all of these instant gratifications and the focus on the little things and start focusing on the big issues? How can we easily incorporate that for ourselves as well?
I think it's very complicated today, and I will get back to that, because before we go into the solutions, I really want for all of you to understand where we are at and why our psychology is so strange right now, and why almost every single person in the Western world wants a police state, because they want their freedoms, and their freedom means that everyone else should be controlled. That's how we see freedom. So when it comes to consequences, this is also connected to the question here. I've addressed this before, that there are studies now showing that part of why kids or young adults who play a lot of video games, they become very disenfranchised and depressed, is not just because, you know, they're living in their mom's basement, but because not all of them are doing that. But in video games, there are no consequences, which is really interesting, right? The worst thing that can happen is that you die, game over, and you start again. Nothing has any practical consequences, and you can just restart. But in life, you can take a wrong turn and your life is ruined, right? You can make decisions that will have consequence for the rest of your life. And when you're used to, you can just restart. And when you already are addicted to instant gratification and your own dopamine, looking at, I make this decision and it will actually have an effect on me for years, it's incomprehensible and it feels very unfair. There are a lot of examples, especially from the States, where you have young people who've accidentally killed someone. It could be running them over with their car or something else, got in a fight, where they actually don't understand that this will have a consequence. That person is okay, so when can I leave? I need to go to school tomorrow, or I need to go to work. So, and they don't understand that this will have a long-term consequence, because in their real life, which is the game world, nothing has consequence, and the brain has been rewired to believe that whatever happens, you just restart. So they cannot comprehend that they have made life decisions and, had behaviors that can affect them for decades. It's just not there. So when you then have that brain, and then you meet the world where you have to work, you need to achieve something, everything is long-term. Nothing is instant gratification if you want to achieve anything in life. That may seem completely overwhelming. Think for a normal, if you are an adult and you've not spent your world in an instant gratification thing, if you were lucky enough to have parents who said no, it means that for younger people, what would be for you if someone told, well, you will work very hard and maybe your grandkids will get something out of it. You won't. Just think of that feeling. You will be working very hard. You will be doing everything you can and you will get nothing. But you're doing it for your grandkids. In Asia, that's been the normal way of thinking. But we think, well, I want to get something out of it. For young people, that is the feeling and kind of thought process they get around. You have to work for it. And in 10 years' time, maybe you will arrive at something. They will have the same psychological response to that as you would have if someone told you that you will be working your entire life and your grandkids will reap the rewards. Because it's a different brain. So when we want instant gratification more than achievement, again, we're trapped in the consumer mindset. So with computer games and consumption, all of that, humans are caught up in the little things because only small things can give you instant gratification. And then politically, whatever it is, like, this is where we are now. And you can see it in politics. You can see it in policies. We get so many stupid policies based on a politician being triggered in their emotions because they don't like something or they want to force other people to do something because they feel like it. It doesn't change anything, but it's that. While the big issues are left completely. So, and as I also said, when it comes to hierarchical position, because we all feel important, we feel that we should have the right to decide what other people should do. And just, again, think of the cancel culture. That is the essence of a police state. Say one thing and people don't like what you're saying, you should be canceled. The thing is, we as humans, we like to see other people punished. And back to the tribe, why is that so satisfying? And why do dictatorships always display public, like hangings or whatever it is? Because when you have a public execution, two things happen in your brain. First, you will have the thought, they deserve it. And they deserve it because they broke the rules. And if you think they deserve it, you will identify with the rules, and then you will be on the ruler's side. So it reinforces your identity as part of the system. And in the other extreme, you can see what happens to those, but you're better than that person, so he got what he deserved. So it has that effect. It's a repellent. Just like we're supposed to, from a tribal point of view, when someone's sick, we're supposed to stay with it. Go and die somewhere else, right? Everything that we don't like, we want to punish, we want to kill, because we are only looking out for our own survival. So freedom of speech ultimately leads to everything being illegal to say. And it's interesting how our psychology works. Because when you see what's happening in the West, you can see it once you see it. And it means we do not have freedom of speech today. We have it in theory, but in many ways they have more freedom in China. You just have to stay away from criticizing the party. But in the West, if you say the wrong thing or have an opinion that is not in vogue in social media, your life can be over. That's capital punishment, and that will become systemic. That will become politics. And you see this already with what's called compelled speech, that it's mandatory to use certain words, certain terms. It's coming, and it's disgusting. But this is what humans do with freedom of speech. It means I should be able to see what I want. It also means that I should not have to listen to what I don't agree with. And that means that, again, everything will be illegal. We are not better than this, unfortunately.
Yes, we have a question online about, is there a way to wake people up to responsibility and the bigger picture, or is it only short-term destruction of nature and our societies that will wake us up?
Today, most people want to be asleep. When you look at the level of self-medication, it's everything we do to avoid being awake. Entertainment, it's food, right? It's ultra-processed foods, it's drugs, it's alcohol. Most people today use drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, and also prescription drugs, opioids. So we are medicating all our pains, physical, emotional, mental, psychological, like all of that. And we use a lot of different types of self-medication. People also use music. There are a lot of people, young people, they have to listen to music all the time because they want to overpower the noise inside. So people are feeling that they're not feeling well. And it's because we have told people that what they feel is more important than anything else. So that becomes very painful. Everything becomes painful. So you have to self-medicate. And then all you want is to have that release. You just don't want to deal with things because it's too much. The thing is, it's too little. It's too pleasant. We're just consuming, right? And that's also the thing. The more sensitive we become, the less we tolerate. And the less we tolerate, the even more sensitive we become. And then we can't work because we're so overwhelmed, or we can't contribute because what about me? People today don't want to wake up. They want to be asleep. They want the big machine to make all their decisions so they can just be in their instant gratification emotions and scream and yell whenever they have to wait for something to be served. So basically we're talking about people who are willing and ready to wake up. It's never been more difficult to wake up than right now. And it will become even more difficult. Because we are trapped. As humans, we're trapped in this big machine, and it's only going one way. And in a police state, people have stopped thinking. They've stopped, critical thinking, reflection, all of that, because we just want to push a button and then we feel good. And we're kind of there already. So it's a personal responsibility thing. So what has happened today also is that, when we focus on the little things, and think of many people today wanting equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity means that we all should have the same opportunity to make something of ourselves and express ourselves, express our lives, no matter our background. So we can compensate, but then it's up to the individual. What many people today want is the equality of outcome. No matter what you do, because that's your thing, we should have the same outcome. And that's extremely dangerous for society because it means that, again, we're moving into that police state. And what's also happening is that people will then be fighting over everything, wanting, each piece of the pie to be exact. And then they fight over what is the exact measurements. What if someone is bigger? What if someone is more hungry or, needs the gluten-free pie? All of that. And then everyone is fighting over how to cut the pie perfectly, and nobody's talking about how to bake more pie. So the corporations are then controlling how much pie is being made, what types, and people are not able to look in that direction anymore because that should just work. So it's part of how we're gradually falling asleep more and more, and it takes a nanny state. It takes the parenting. It takes the full totalitarian police state, because this is what people want. When you look at often people who say they want freedom, they are behaving extremely irresponsibly. Have you noticed that? They don't care about people around them. They don't care about the consequences they have. It's the only way out is personal responsibility. And then we have to look at, what does that even imply anymore? You know, what is it? It's back to what we talked about, a value system. What are your values? Right? And it's important that we sit down and analyze this. Sit with pen and paper by the computer and try to figure out, what are your values? If you were to, boil everything down to 5 to 10 different values that you represent, that are very important to you, that I feel, I want this is my platform. I don't care what values you have, as long as you have some. Most people are not aware of this at all. This is, again, the difference. Why religious people often are more productive, are more caring. They are better at long-term thinking and achievement. Like all of these, they perform better because they have a clear value system. So if you're not religious, you still need to define your values. And then once you have figured out kind of what you stand for, what is really important to you and how you want to live your life, then it's turn that into policies. How do these values dictate my behavior? What do I want to represent in life? How do I show this? How do I live by these values? Because this is how we take responsibility. It's by being a kind of whole person. Just an example. If it's okay, being loving is very important. There's, okay, how do you actually show that? How does that translate into concrete behavior and choices? Right? Then you have to study, what concretely will this mean? When I'm, going to the grocery store, what does that mean? How do I live by my value of being a loving person? Could that be, for instance, trying to find products that are made by people who actually mean something, who are actually trying to do something? Does that kind of dictate that I should make an effort? Should I look for someone in the store so you can smile? Should you avoid harmful products? How should you behave at the checkout? It's all these things, but every value you will have to figure out, how does this translate, and how do I make sure that people experience my values through my behavior? This is also what religion is good at. If you're, if you're an active religious person and you do it for real, right? You take personal responsibility, but you want people to see or experience the proof of the pudding by interacting with you. And this is, I think, also a big lack in modern spirituality. Because when you look at most people involved in modern spirituality, they're just self-centered. They don't care. They have no apparent values except, their own needs and their own egos. So becoming aware of what you represent in the world, how do you do it? That is really important. It's also important to stop blaming others, like take full responsibility for your own life. Stop being a consumer, because being a consumer means that you let others make decisions for you. Most people, when they buy something, it's not because they need it, it's because they've been told that they need it. It can be through trends, social media, what they see on TV. It can be self-medication, it can be all of those things. It can be marketing. Because marketing is trying to trigger that short-term gratification thing, so go out and buy it. And then it's the next thing. So it's taking a step back and trying to not be a consumer, but being mindful. And with intention, look at all the options you have and then make choices based on what you want to build in your life, based on your values. This is not difficult. But our society has completely lost the plot when it comes to kind of living with morals and ethics and productive behavior.
We have a question in the audience.
Okay. Okay. So,
But actually, we got a question here that it's interesting. You started by stating that police states are inevitable,
Yes.
And that it will continue for a long time and probably get worse. And you've explained the causes in detail. But the challenge put to you, IKYA, now is what else is important for those who create instead of just endure?
well, that's to understand that, number one, what the masses do is of no relevance. This is part of how we wake up, is to take full, and I mean full, responsibility for our own existence and how we interact with life and how we affect life around us. So, we need to, again, take a step back and learn that no matter what other people do, no matter what they say, no matter what happens, that does not give you the instruction to what to say or behave. It basically means move out of the reactive state. Because part of human social intelligence is simply that we go around and react to each other. And everybody's reacting to everyone else, and this is how the collective consciousness actually works. If you want out of it, you have to stop reacting. So, when someone does something and you are triggered, no, you are in reaction. Then you become the same. What we need to do is to decide what we want to represent in the world. And no matter what people say or do, we refer to that, and then we breathe, and we say, okay, when someone does something terrible, well, what the world needs is then someone who behaves like an adult, someone who takes responsibility, someone who can be in a state of heart in healing and order, not someone who reacts to that and yells and screams and wants to, beat someone up. So this is what we can do and what is important. This is for people who are creative. They normally are better at listening to what comes through them than being in a state of reaction. So practicing that, because a mature individual will not live from reaction. They will live from the kind of flow coming through. But we have to just accept the fact that most people, they are falling asleep, they want to be asleep, and it takes a big machine. And that's the police state. They don't want to think, they only want to feel good. But for those involved with spiritual work or growth work, we have to snap out of it. We have to learn how to take kind of self-control, learn self-discipline. And it's back to do not focus on the small things. Right? Because to me, this is a rule of thumb, because you can notice in your own life. When you're focusing too much on the small things, it means that you've given up on the big ones. Right? It's the only reason why you would focus on the small things. When you react to small, insignificant things, and most of you are, it's a sign that you've given up on the big things. Right? So that should be a red flag. Because most of the things you care about are insignificant. They don't matter. We make them matter. As I say, like when we cannot deal with the big issues, we make the small issues big. look at that pattern in you, because it will tell you if you're doing things that matter. And this is also what you can see. People who actually achieve things, they don't care about little things. And you can see it whenever you meet someone who has achieved great things in their own life in some way. They don't care about small things. If it's this way or that way, they couldn't care less. Because they're dealing with the big issues, the big things, and know that's what matters. Everything else is just like, yeah, sure, whatever. Right? So when you're not doing that, it will be all these little things, and that's the consumer mindset. So stop obsessing about things that don't matter. Those are the issues that trigger your emotions the most. You have to call kind of this game and this bluff in your own brain. It's an indication that you're failing. Try to identify the big issues in your life that actually matters. The things that would change everything. The things that are worth working for and living for and dying for. Things that take time. Right? True achievements. Those will be big things. It can be, processes within. It can be for you to work on certain karma. It could be what you want to achieve in life. But once you identify those and you try to do something about what actually matters, you will just feel that, all right, small things, just, and you will be generous and open. You can see people, if they do it this way or that, I'm fine. Because you got bigger fish to fry and you're doing it. But to deal with the bigger issues in your life, you need to educate yourself. Right? Because if your map is too small, you will just want to dominate. And that's not a solution for the big issues. And yet this is also what you can see when people are uneducated. And they want to change big things. They just want to dominate. A lot of emotions there too. If you want to truly deal with the big issues in your life, you need to educate yourself. You need to be informed. You need to create context. You need to expand your map so that you can understand how to do things for real. Because when you deal with the big issues, as we talked about in the beginning, it means that you still remain your size. And you also get a better kind of perspective of the proportion of you versus life. So when you're dealing with the big issues in your life, you also feel that you're doing something beyond you. You always have to discipline your feelings. You have to regulate your feelings and your needs to achieve that, which means you become a better person. Anything big takes time. It takes effort. It takes stamina. It takes all of these things, right? And it regulates you out of the consumer mindset, out of the instant gratification. Right? For instance, if you're building a house, that can take 2 years or several years, right? And you can find joy in the process. Nothing is instant about it, but you can find how to, find these kind of nuggets of joy and excitement in that long process. It's that. And when you identify that, for instance, you need to change the family dynamic. That takes time, it takes skill, it takes effort, it takes experimentation, it takes that. You educate yourself, all of that. If you want to build a career, you can. If you want to get rich, you can. If you want to make an impact on the world, you need to understand how to do that. Screaming and yelling and criticizing is not it. And what we need to learn is to also, instead of criticizing and blaming, offer an alternative. Figure out how to offer something better and how to present it to the world in such a way that the world wants it. Right? This consumer mindset is that we just complain about things, but we don't really do anything about them because it's not our job. It is. Right? So when we understand that, right, blaming is me not taking responsibility. Criticizing is me not taking responsibility. I can identify that, I can do better Well, come up with that better thing and offer it, introduce it, do something about it. If not, shut your fucking mouth. Right? It's extremely harmful the way we behave in our society. Unless you actively change it, don't talk about it. That is what a responsible person does. Right? So there are many things we can do, but I say it's the perspective. It's understanding that we're all brainwashed at this point. We're all manipulated. This big machine of consumption, short-term thinking, instant gratification is so toxic. And we can see now that humans have been affected by it. We now have politicians who are completely, their brains have been rewired because of it. And our whole culture is moving into a very strange place. And it will take a long time before it heals.
I've been itching to jump in because you've been teaching lately about the endarkenment. And I was thinking about everything I know about the Enlightenment is that people, even very everyday people, uneducated people, were fascinated by everything that was being sort of discovered and learned, and the big picture and science and principles and all of that. And you can see it playing. You've talked about the endarkenment, but really tonight we are talking about the active, practical endarkenment playing out in our world, where people are choosing to become ignorant, choosing to ignore, choosing, the feelings and opinions over facts. And I just wanted to chime in and, like, if you wanted to speak for a second about that endarkenment, because it's so directly connected tonight.
Absolutely. When you look at the Enlightenment, right, it was also about ideals, back to value systems, and then trying to become those values. So you had ideals. What did it mean to be a human, a thinking human, a knowledgeable human, someone who could contribute to life? So people would say, oh, it's up there and we can stretch, we can strive for, and we can try to become better through these ideals. What we're doing today is the opposite. Because again, our genetics are fucking with us. Because when we have access to everything, as I told you, that we think that we're all that. When you can just like snap your fingers and you can get whatever you want. Throughout all of human evolution, it means that you were the king. You were the high priest. You were declared a god. So genetically, this is how we interpret it. So we're so important. So instead of striving for ideals, we define ourselves as the ideal. Because how else could this happen? Although we're rationally can say, well, it's just consumption thing, but genetically we don't understand it. We're gods, and everyone is offering their offerings, because we're a god. So we believe that what we feel and think is so important, more important than anything else. So we become the ideal. There's no need to stretch. And then young people say, oh, you're so wise, you're so clever, which is bullshit, of course. But we're kind of catering to that whole thing. And for each generation, we're getting worse. So we're just full of ourselves at this point. So it's the opposite of the Enlightenment, where humans try to figure out, like when we take religion aside, what is the ideal? What can we work towards and work together? So that movement, they're trying to become better based on authority, religion, the king, all the gods that humans have invented. It's basically always been creating these ideals, right? Based on value system, based on how we understand that the world works, based on the knowledge at the time. And then we're trying to become better. But consumption has turned it around and said, I'm the ideal. You should bow to me. You should be an ally. You should do what I want. Everything should work the way I want it to. And of course, companies are offering more and more, tailoring. This is what we see in social media with your feed, products. Everything is becoming more and more catered to whatever you want because you are a god. And then we become dumber and dumber because why should we learn anything if I'm already the ideal? So people feel they don't need to learn anything. They just need to hear more on what they already agree with. Because after all, you're a god, right? You're already the ideal. So we're doing extremely harmful things in the sake of comfort and safety and inclusion and equality and freedom. Humans are not designed by nature to be able to deal with those things, only trying to achieve them. So when we want to wake up spiritually, we have to choose a different path. We have to set ideals beyond what we are. We have to understand that, we're not quite there yet. Right? And we see it also in modern spirituality, all these people running around and thinking, oh, they know everything, right? Everyone's a teacher on Instagram, right? And posing, it's natural, but it's a bluff. It's the same thing. And we need to see through it, right? Because everyone feels, oh, I know so much, I should share it with the world. It's the same illusion. And it's okay, but it's still just bullshit. So understand that you are not the ideal. You are not the universal blueprint. You're a garbage dump waiting to be processed for its raw materials, and then, it's more that. We got to be realistic and look at all our patterns, all this stuff, but what we do is to turn that into how things should be. And as I said, I've talked a lot about how we divinify our blockages and our patterns because we want to be the ideal, because there could never be anything wrong with us, right? So in spiritual work, humans have just fallen into the same traps as everyone else. The same level of consumption, entitlement, all of that. If you want to wake up, step 1, stop reacting. Number 2, take responsibility for absolutely everything in your life. 3, work on long-term thinking. Try to achieve something. Have stamina. As it show your values. Which means, for instance, the typical thing we often see is that, oh, I represent this or that. Yeah, and then they end up in a situation where they have a fight with someone and behaving terribly. Right? Where they do this thing, where they self-medicate. Well, it was just this once. It's not consistent. Your consciousness is represented by what you consistently do, not what you consistently say you do. And it's that. We need to do the job for real. And this is the difference between someone who has started the process of awakening and someone who's not. You do it for real. In the real world, you get real results. You build yourself up. You have self-observation and reflection, and you improve yourself on all levels. And it shows in real life, right? And you have a better balance. You're not overcome with your emotions and feelings or your needs and your story and your ego. All of that is there, but you're able to kind of balance it. You're able to still improve and become a better person as well, right? It's not like working with spirituality should make you more self-centered, more disconnected, and more high on yourself. It's not how it works. It has the opposite effect. You develop more empathy. You develop more self-control. You develop more perspective, right? You take yourself and your needs less seriously. You try to contribute and you try to make the world a better place for real. It's actual work. It's real work. And we focus on ourselves. We understand that to lift the world, we need to lift ourselves first. We need to become the example. right? When you think that you're already the ideal, you're in, oh, I should lift the world because look at me, right? When you look at modern spirituality, this is what's going on, and it's disgusting. It doesn't help. It's part of the problem. It's childishness. It's the same consumer mindset that you find in people who are deep asleep. And it's just spiritualized. This is why I always say you cannot fake consciousness. You can try, but nature doesn't care. Your actual level of consciousness will reveal itself. And you can bluff as much as you want to, but it only affects you and people who are deep asleep. If you want to interact with life, if you want to achieve higher level consciousness, it requires everything. And if you can't even pull yourself out of the collective game that we've been talking about today that ends up in a nanny state, you haven't even begun yet. Right? So it's back to that kind of personal responsibility and looking at what we do, our choices, how it affects other people, how it affects the world. That we do everything with intention and with mindfulness, and that we try to set the example of how things can be done. I often say that what we should always try to use, no matter what consciousness we're in, is just take that little experiment and say, okay, if what I do and who I am became universal, right, and the default, would it benefit everyone? Right? Because what the human ego said, well, it's just me, I can just do that. If you want to be the example you set has to improve everything. If it's not, you're not setting a good example. This is what I mean by doing the work. We have to filter everything we think, feel, do, express, manifest. And it starts by understanding this thought. If what I'm doing in this minute, what I'm expressing, what I'm feeling, if this became universal, would this benefit everyone? Would this uplift? And it begins to regulate our self-importance and what we think we can get away with. Understand that even what you do while alone matters because you're doing it in the world. You're still interacting with nature. You should still set the example. It's never about what you can get away with, right? It's how much responsibility you can take. Because that is the true essence of expansion of consciousness. It's also what you're doing, when nobody's looking. Because you're part of nature. Nature is looking. So there's no easy way on a personal level to move out of this. We have to accept that our culture, our civilization is moving in this direction because it's necessary. People want it. But it doesn't mean that you have to. And the more you grow spiritually, the less rules about meaningless things mean to you. Like they have in the EU, it was really funny, 15 years ago, where they decided, the shape of cucumber. It's just like, what? But sure, industrial standards, no, it's what people want. But as you expand, you see, it's just little things. Sure, you can do that. You have no reaction to it. It doesn't trigger you. It's just how humans operate because you focus on the big things. And you cannot focus on the big things, you're going to focus on the small ones, right? Try to see this in our collective society, but also in yourself and how you can navigate. You cannot reach greatness if you're preoccupied with petty little things. It's not how it works. Identify the biggest fucking mountains in your life and start climbing. Forget the rest. It doesn't matter. Right? And that's how we do it. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, we had a question online. There doesn't appear to be any financial capital in the world devoted to upliftment. Most of the long-term plans and strategies seem to be about expanding the machine that you've been talking about tonight. Where is the opening for higher consciousness to transform on a societal level?
There is none. Remember that this is the result of people's choices. Genetically, we want chemicals, we want dopamine. Understand that our brain chemicals are there to give us instructions and to tell us when we're doing something right based on our genetic programming. So for instance, when we find a lot of food, we get a lot of dopamine, right? When we do something wrong, we're supposed to feel shame. So all these different chemicals and combinations of them are there to help us navigate. And then we discovered very early on that I can manipulate myself so I can feel good, right? So from very early on, humans figure out, oh, I can figure out how to increase my dopamine by myself. That became the #1 product in our civilization. It is the only product in our civilization. The rest is how to achieve it. But all products today are sold to increase your dopamine, increase your addiction, right? So just different ways to do it, right? So you have to see that is the only product in our society. And because we're genetically kind of programmed to seek brain chemistry, because that's a sign that we're doing it right and we're getting all these positive feelings and all that, it's so easy to get addicted. Hardly any normal person today are not severely addicted to all of this. So, and now we have a machine with billions of products all designed to trigger your dopamine, to make you feel good or to make you feel something or be the one you want to be, all of that. So of course there's no money doing anything else because people don't want it. It's the same thing as if people have voted out any thinking politician. They don't want them. They just want people who can trigger and to voice their feelings, right? So of course, when you look at business and money, from the Industrial Revolution and before Second World War, you had a lot of people and business and leaders who took a lot of responsibility. And they saw that, oh, I'm actually, a custodian of wealth. I want to build society. I want to pull and lift and build a better world. And so that's what they were doing. Not all of them, but a lot of them. But as humans just wanted stuff with no morals, no ethics, we rewarded, as society, the companies with the least ethics. The ones who took shortcuts because we just want cheap stuff. So we've been grooming the world of business to become as unethical as it can possibly be. No morals, no nothing. It's just that big machine. Give us cheap stuff and I will give you money. Give me stuff that can make me feel things without any value. You should not really take any consideration in it because that will stop the production. So we have, as a society, decided that this is the business we want. And we've also decided we want the business leaders that are ruthless and who don't really take any other consideration than money and stuff. We don't care about slavery. As I say, you're willing to sacrifice every other person in the world as long as they're not part of your tribe. So it's not that, they're conspiring on top. Humans on the bottom have been conspiring because they have decided to reward the companies who give them whatever can give them the next fix. So of course, companies have had to adjust to that, and then the leaders become ruthless. Then the leaders become a product of that way of thinking. It's controlled from the bottom. It's not controlled from the top. Because the moment humans bought other stuff or stopped buying or made mindful decisions, business would change overnight, right? So you have the power. Not you as an individual by yourself, unless you're filthy rich, but it's humans, right? And you have to see that because humans love that. It's not us. It is you. So when you look at the world, when you see politics, when you see business, all of that, it's because it's wanted by the people on the bottom. They just want the shortcuts to their own dopamine. So we've been pushing this as far as it goes as a life form. And now we will be paying the consequences. And it will regulate itself. But humans don't want to. So first, the police state. And then artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence will at this point do a much better job than politicians and business leaders. So we should not fear it, which we should anticipate it and hope that it will do a better job. So of course, again, there is no room for anything else. Humans don't want it, right? Humans say they want, a better world, blah, 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 but when you look at their individual behaviors and the choices they make individually, it tells a different story. Humans want other people to take responsibility. Other people should make, choices that are better for the environment, not me. And that's their reality. So it's not going to happen unless humans are forced to. So it will happen. This is, again, why when it comes to spiritual work, it is down to you, your choices, your behavior, your consistency in what you want to show in the world. You cannot change the world. You can only change yourself. You can change what you represent. And at the same time, you have to allow for everyone to be where they are in the consciousness they're in, because this is the train we're on. This is the journey. And you can't change that. But you can change your journey as a kind of part of this collective train moving in a very specific direction. Right? You can create a life that is balanced and joyful and sustainable, if that's what you want. Loving and nurturing, where you live with a high level of moral and ethics and values. Nobody's stopping you from that. So look at yourself, look at your life. Shape up. Do better. The world around you does not dictate what you do, the values you stand for, and what you want to represent in the world. This is where we need to do the job. Because even in a police state, when you are awake spiritually, you will still have the freedom. It's all these little things. They will not matter. You will understand how to be patient and loving with a collective consciousness. Of course they need it. They need nannies. They need parenting because humans have stopped thinking. They've stopped taking responsibility. They just want to, feed their addiction. Of course. But you don't have to. Right? But when you look at your own behaviors and say, well, I'm doing it too, well, stop. Show some character, show some discipline. Work with others. Seek support, seek people where you can kind of build that stamina, because today we're all brainwashed. And I know it. I talk to so many of you who are struggling with the simplest level of discipline. Right? It's difficult for humans today, but do not for a moment believe that you're necessarily better. But you can train, you can practice. You can't do it all by yourself. But you have to be absolutely decided on taking full responsibility. Moving out of reaction. Right? And kind of build this platform that we talked about. It's not even difficult. But be consistent. Don't let yourself get away with anything. When you've decided on your values, live by them. Show them. But be generous enough to allow other people to do whatever they do. Right? When we are consistent on all levels in ourselves. When you live, what you know is true on the inside. Right? When that has been translated into values and ethics and rules and that you live by, you will be happy. This is how we become happy. When we're basically consistent in all levels and that we're able to express through that level of consistency. It doesn't matter what limitations we have, what government we have, what type of business, what kind of product, it doesn't matter. When you are consistent, you will be happy. It's all these inconsistencies that are making people depressed, that are making people, desperate and miserable. When we do the work, truly, we will be happy, we will be balanced, we will be productive. We will become the example that other people can use as the ideal of what they should stretch for. And if you're not that person, you've not, really done the work. You're not awake yet. You should become a universal. That's a sign that you're reaching a level of maturity spiritually and also as a person. Right? So try to have a hard talk with yourself. Because when you can see where the world is heading, you don't have to contribute to that. By setting the example of how to wake up, then you can inspire others in doing the same. You have no credibility if you haven't done the work. This is also why it's kind of tough being my student, because I expect and I demand that my student actually do this for real. But it's the only way we can have credibility. It's the only way we can uplift the world. You need to vibrate the alternative. You need to be an awakened individual in energy. That will inspire. That will lift. So grow out of your childishness, all of it, and embrace adulthood as a person, as a spiritual being, and as someone who wants to influence and uplift the world. It can be done. It should be done. And it must be done.
Thank you so much, IKYA, and thank you all for joining us tonight for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice in your everyday life. Thank you for joining us online and here at IKYA Center, and we hope that you IKYA gave us so many ways in which we can become lights in the world as it becomes darker. And June is a very busy month here at IKYA Center, so we will not see you next Monday, but we'll be back on the 17th of June, and then have our finale before summer holidays on the 24th of June. So 2 more episodes before summer holidays. We very much look forward to seeing you then on Monday the 17th of June at 19 o'clock Oslo time, both here at IKYA Center and online with YouTube Live. And until then, have a beautiful week.